Hi, it's Catherine. It's Sunday, November 22nd, 2020. I'm coming to you from Idlewild, in case you don't recognize the scene behind me. I actually made a couple of videos which I just realized I haven't posted, so I may post a couple. But this one was inspired by recent events, in particular of yesterday, and inspired again by my dog Ollie and walking with Ollie and my experiences with Ollie, what I have learned from my dog. Today, what I have learned from my dog, or one of the lessons that I've learned, is what you give is what you get, right? The energy you give is the energy you get back. And even if you're not the one that originally gave it, you can still control it. So when we first got Ollie a year ago, walking him was a nightmare. There were lots of aspects to the nightmarish walking of him, besides the fact that he has an incredibly strong prey drive, and so anything that moved, squirrel, bird, lizard, butterfly, moth, anything, gnats, he would go after it. And that would result in, lunging on the leash, pulling, that sort of thing. God forbid another dog should happen along, or even worse, a dog should start barking at him from a yard. And if we were passing a house where a dog began to bark at him, he would really lose it. He would start doing a dance. He would start jumping up and down. He would bark. His hackles would raise. He would knock into me. He knocked me over a couple of times. I was starting to have shoulder issues from him pulling so much at different points in the walk. I changed my route. I tried to figure out what time I could go so that we wouldn't see other dogs, or that other dogs were less likely to be out in their yards yet. I did all kinds of things to avoid it. Eventually, Ollie went to reform school in New Orleans while we were there for 4 months this summer and into the fall. They worked lovely miracles, which I know were a lot of work, and we're still continuing the work that they did. It's not as if when you send your dog to reform school that you get them back and then they're just fine and you never have to do anything. I work with him every day on the leash, doing different stuff, and he's been great. One of the funny things that I noticed, or one of the interesting things actually that I noticed when we first got back, was walking him was a much more pleasant experience, for one thing, because he was healing on the leash. He was getting a lot less agitated when we happened upon other dogs. Now, one of the things in particular that they worked on with him in reform school was to not pay any attention to any other dogs. That no matter what another dog was doing, he was not supposed to even look, much less get agitated, respond in any way. And that seemed to be working pretty well when we were in New Orleans, and he got used to being in Auburn Park. He still had some difficulty with dogs barking at him from behind fences, and so we were working very hard on that aspect, and that's something I worked on with him a lot in New Orleans before we left. Ollie is not a dumb dog, and he's got a great memory. And Ollie happened to remember every single yard on our walk where dogs used to bark at him, even though he hadn't been here in 4 months. And I, of course, also remembered where those dogs were too. And I was very curious as to how Ollie was going to respond. Now, when we first got back, almost 2 months ago, I guess now, closing in on that, Ollie would get very agitated. He didn't bark anymore. He had stopped barking, but he would get jumpy, not jumpy to the point where he knocked me over, but he would start to kind of bounce, and he would get agitated, and I could see that he was agitated. His hackles would go up, and I could see him wanting to respond. One thing that I noticed was that on our walks, the dogs, over time, stopped barking at him so much. Or at the very least, they would bark once or twice, and then they would stop. Almost as if once they saw him or smelled him, realized who he was, and that he wasn't responding, they stopped being aggressive toward him from behind their fence. Now, there was one particular part of our walk, at the end of our walk, I actually changed my route so that I wouldn't have to go down dog gauntlet anymore, which is what I called it in my head. Because there was a corner at Tollgate, which is a road here in my neighborhood. And on one side, there were two dogs that would throw themselves against the fence, barking, snarling, going nuts. Dog on the other side doing the exact same thing at the same time. So I had him coming and going from both sides. And that was a part that really felt dangerous at one point before we left Idlewild, where he would knock into me. He'd be jumping, he'd be pulling. I almost fell over there. I'd literally fallen over on other parts of our walk. Don't think I ever actually completely fell down to the ground there, but I came close. But it felt like a particularly dangerous part of our walk. I noticed that Ollie had the strongest response at dog gauntlet, which isn't surprising because it was the most intense sort of dog encounter that we had on our walks. And I also noticed, well, two things. One, the two dogs on the right as we were coming down the hill, they haven't been around. I don't know what's happened to them. I don't know where they've gone. They've gone off the hill. Something happened. The owners have left. I'm not sure what's happened. But the dog on the left was most definitely still there. But I did notice that as we plodded along every day, and we go up to Inspiration Point every day up Doubleview Drive. You've probably seen me post some pictures of Inspiration Point, which is the top of our walk. We go straight uphill practically, and then we come back down. I noticed that this dog was spending less and less time barking at him as we passed by, and that Ollie was getting decidedly less agitated. He wasn't quite at the point where he wasn't getting agitated at all. He would still kind of look, and I'd have to correct him. But he wasn't bouncing, he wasn't pulling, he wasn't barking. His hackles sometimes still went up. And then yesterday, we were walking, and of course I'm aware that we're coming up on the yard, and so is Ollie, because he clearly remembered every single dog on the route. And he was calm, and I was calm, and we were walking. And that dog, I saw it in the yard. It was in the yard. And I saw it lying down on the ground. And we plodded along. And I saw the dog lift its head up, kind of crane its neck over toward us, clock us, rolled back over, stretched out in the sun. Nothing. Nothing. And Ollie just kept going. And I thought, wow, look at that. Here this dog had been so aggressive on every single walk, every single day for months, and even after we returned. And it took a little while, but Ollie not responding to him eventually made that dog feel that it was safe enough that it no longer needed to be aggressive toward him. It wasn't overnight. It wasn't the first time we walked by and Ollie didn't respond. It took time. And it took Ollie calming down some and not giving any energy at all. And it took that dog being reassured day after day after day that Ollie wasn't going to be aggressive. Now that dog doesn't care. Now that dog just stretches out lazily in the sun when we show up. That's a huge difference. And I think it applies to people too, obviously. So that was my experience yesterday that inspired me to tell you that story in hopes that maybe it might be helpful with some situation in your life, whether it's with your dog or yourself. Anyway, best of love to all of you, whatever you're doing this week. I know it's still hard. If we can, at least a little bit each day, take a little time to focus on something other than all the mess that's going on around us. I think that's all I have for today. Bye. Take care. Thank you. Mwah.